On the 18th day of Grotmas, G-Dubs gave to me a new mixed detachment for the GSC. Welcome to the Grotmas Detachment Show, where each and every day from December 1st to the 24th, Games Workshop releases a new detachment for every army in Warhammer 40k. It's an exciting time and there's a lot to talk about, so let's break it down for you and give you an easy to understand first look at these detachments. Happy Grotmas, everybody! Let's take a look at this brand new Genestealer Cults detachment called Final Day. This is, as some people predicted, a mixed detachment between the forces of the Hivemind. This means you're going to have some Tyranids allowed in your Genestealer Cults list. Let's take a look at it, starting off with the detachment rules. We have the Star Children's Blessings, and this allows you to include Vanguard Invader units from the Tyranids Codex, other than Aircraft, Broodlord, and Genestealers. This makes sense on a number of levels. The Broodlord and the Genestealers, you have an equivalent in the list. And also, I am particularly happy because all of my issues with Hivemind lists in the past has been the fact that by the time the Tyranids arrive, the Genestealer Cultists are just getting devoured, so it makes absolutely no sense. In this case, you're only getting those infiltrating and scouting units, so it's a bit more believable for me. In this case, you can take up to 1,000 points of NID units in your 2,000 point games, and as usual, none of them can be your Warlord. This will give you a number of benefits, starting off with Psionic Parasitism. What this does is, in the end of your movement phase, for each Synapse unit from your army, you pick a GSC unit other than Genestealer and Patriarch, and you pick a NIDS unit with a 9 invisible to the Synapse unit. The GSC unit will then take D3 plus 1 mortal wounds, and the Tyranid unit will then heal that many wounds and get plus 1 to hit until their next movement phase. So you're basically siphoning wounds from the Genestealer Cults, healing the Tyranid, and giving them a nice little hit buff. Pretty interesting here. I imagine taking lots of cheap bodies from the GSC and respawning them to superpower some of these key NID units. But of course, don't forget the things that you actually do have here are things like the Flying Hive Tyrant, the Lictors, the Neurolictor, the Death Leaper, and Gargoyles. So it is potentially very powerful, but we also have limited unit choices. Next up, we have Catalyst. This is going to be a rule on all NID units, and while an enemy unit is within 6 inches of this unit, GSC get plus 1 to hit against them. Very powerful buff, and I think this synergizes a bit better with the types of infiltrating, scouting, draft units that you'll get with this detachment. So interesting kind of core rules here. Let's take a look at the enhancements. We've got, as always, 4 of them. Starting off with Synaptic Augur at 15 points. You put this on a Tyranid model, and this model regains double wounds from Psionic Parasitism. I really like this on the Flying Hive Tyrant, who has enough wounds to make this worth your go. Enrapture Damnation is a 10-point enhancement on a GSC model only, and your opponent cannot overwatch this unit. Fantastic ability for 10 points. I think you'll take this each and every time, ideally on one of those big bricks of Neophytes. We have a 25-point enhancement called Vanguard Tyrant. This can only go on a Winged Hive Tyrant, and they're going to get plus 1 strength and plus 1 AP in melee. Very, very exciting ability here. I think that really ratchets up their damage in a big way. Finally, we have Inhuman Integration at 20 points. This is only on a GSC model, and the bearer's unit has sustained 1 against enemies that are within 6 inches of a friendly NID unit. Again, another fantastic enhancement here. Also take note that this does work in melee as well as shooting, so I think this has a little bit more flexibility, and this is one of my other things that I like about this detachment is it feels like we have a good balance between buffs that are meant for shooting and buffs that are meant for melee. So overall, I'd say we have 4 strong enhancements here. I'm actually kind of hard pressed to pick which 3 I would take, which is always a good sign for a detachment. With that, let's take a look at these stratagems, starting off with Hyper Ferocity at 1 CP. In your fight phase, 1 GSC unit can gain reroll wound rolls of 1, or if they're within 6 inches of a Tyranid unit, they get full rerolls to wound. Very, very exciting ability here. You're going to really superpower a number of different units. In particular, I'm actually thinking about those pure strain Genestealers that don't normally have the wound rerolls in GSC. Psi Surge is a 1 CP stratagem at the start of any phase. You can increase the catalyst range by 3 inches, and if you do so, you cannot then use a stratagem again until their next movement phase. This basically means that you can use it flexibly, but you cannot stack it by just triggering it each phase. Avenge the Star Children is pretty funny. It's 1 CP. This is basically one of those revenge strats. So if your opponents kill a NIDS character, then your GSC units will get plus 1 to hit and wound against the unit that dealt the final blow. Again, very situational, but potentially strong if you can force them to kill one of your characters that are just running around. Divine Imperative at 1 CP is triggered in your charge phase and gives you plus 1 to charge and reroll charges for a GSC unit when you're charging an enemy that's already in combat with NIDS. There are a lot of hoops to jump through this, so it's not my favorite. I kind of wish it was advance and charge rather than plus 1 and reroll, but it'll definitely see use to deliver some of these fragile units. Darting attacks is 1 CP in your shooting phase or your charge phase, and a NIDS unit can shoot and charge after falling back. Do note that this only lasts for the phase, so really you're picking, do you want to shoot, do you want to charge? You can do both, but you'll have to trigger the stratagem twice. And finally, resistance tunnels at 1 CP. This triggers at the end of your opponent's fight phase, and this is classic uppy downy. You can pick a GSC or NIDS unit that's not in engagement range, and they'll go back into reserve. Remember, this will re-trigger Deep Strike if they have it. So overall, it's an interesting detachment. I personally like to play pure GSC for the mentioned lore reasons that we had earlier, but I think it's the most compelling version that we've seen thus far, where you're getting some interesting benefits. As always, the question becomes though, is this going to be better from a competitive perspective than the detachments that we currently have in the book? With so many changes to Genestealer Cults, I think it's not entirely clear. I would probably say it's a little bit weaker, but very flavorful, which seems to be the goal for these Grotmas detachments. Of course, I'm very curious to hear from all you GSC players. What do you think about this detachment in the comments below? And what are you looking forward to in tomorrow's reveals?